Welcome to the July session of the Gets Education program. We're going to start with a review of last month. The topic was servers. Our learning objectives were to understand server services provided by Gets, understand the Gets charges for servers, and to become familiar with the primary processes and tools to manage an agency's usage of servers. The learning objectives evaluation was handed out, and we got those results back, and no specific outcomes came out of that particular session. Moving on to additional Gets Education news, we are having a Gets Dispute Process Education session coming up on August 28th at the request of those participating in the Gets Education program. And additionally, we're having what we're calling Gets Education 2, where we're extending the training that we've been doing here to your staff. If you have someone that you want to be involved with that, you can contact Lanny Creedle, and he can facilitate your people joining that. It's going to be an hourly conference call once a week with materials distributed ahead of time so we can field questions. So here's the Gets Education 2 schedule. You can see we're going to go through the same items: invoice overview, transformation, EUC, server storage, mainframe, invoice, WAN and LAN, and the dates that we're going to do that. So just a reminder of our schedule. This month, July is storage, and next month will be mainframe. So let's jump right into the storage section today. First, let's go over our common understanding here. So our objectives are the same as most sessions. We're looking to understand storage services provided by Gets, to understand the way charges are calculated in a Gets invoice for storage, to become familiar with primary processes and tools to manage an agency's uses of storage and resource units. And if you're sitting down with your CRM to review this, they're going to ask you to fill out the feedback form so we can make sure that you're understanding this information adequately. So, like we said before, we're going to review your feedback, and the dispute process meeting is an example of us reviewing the feedback and putting together a meeting for that. And we're committed to your success. So for today, our agenda is better understand your Get storage services, to understand the resource units and charges for the storage tower, and to understand how to leverage primary processing tools to better manage your service in the storage tower. So we start with this idea again that the Gets model is a paradigm shift where we moved from buying and maintaining hardware to purchasing IT services. So the consumption model, the model is consumption-based and is becoming best practice in private industry. The agency owns consumption management. GTA provides transparency into the actual costs and services, and also provides the training and tools that empower the agency to manage its consumption. The agency gets to avoid costly investments in equipment that quickly becomes obsolete, and the ongoing cost of IT support staff needed to maintain that equipment. So what we have here first is a picture of the resource units on your invoice that are for storage. And it can be thought of in two different buckets. You have SAN, and then you have backup. So today, we're going to start with the top half here, which is SAN. Now, these divisions in blue and orange aren't on your actual invoice, but just done organizationally for the sake of our presentation today. So what is SAN? SAN is an acronym for Storage Area Network. The storage network is used to store data utilized by application and file servers daily by gigabyte. So in the diagram here, you have a logical description of what's going on. You have servers that are directly attached to a storage area network, and that's where the data is stored. And if you may have noticed, on the invoice, you have Tier 1, Tier 2, Tier 3 in SAN storage. And you might ask, why is SAN tiered? Well, each tier is purposed for a different business requirement. Some data is more important than others. And the business requirements determine the level of storage needed. And with each successive tier, you have a decrease in cost and level of service. So if we review the tiers for SAN, you have Tier 1, which is for mission-critical data, a very high-speed environment, and it's the most costly type of storage. Currently, there's only one application in the GETS environment that runs on Tier 1. I should say uses Tier 1. Then Tier 2, which is our most common used type of storage, and it's for business-critical data. You'll find that it's for most of the SANs we have out there today. And then as far as Tier 3 is concerned, Tier 3 is something that is going to be built more in the future as we move through transformation, and file services is used, which stores data on Tier 2 and then replicates it to Tier 3. And it's the least expensive storage of the SAN storage resource units. We always like to show a picture of transformation before and after GETS. So here we have before GETS, the storage spread across multiple sites, and data center housing SAN was the central point of failure, but today we're moving storage into the North Atlanta data center, and it has full redundancy. In the past, monitoring varied by agency just depending on the level of IT that was going on there, but today the enterprise phone home hardware monitoring, at the end of the day, the hardware monitors itself and calls in when it's having an issue. Before GETS, your storage options were limited, and today you have tiered storage available on your agency's performance requirements. And then before GETS, we've talked about this in the past. There were capital expenditures when there was money available, and most of the storage was directly attached to servers. And today, there's after GETS, you have a storage hardware refresh every 5 years that is no longer in agencies to manage. Before GETS, remote site storage was local with no monthly charges. Once again, it was like an attached drive to a server. You pay the initial cost but don't see ongoing monthly costs. But today, storage is in the NADC for file services, and it is a monthly charge. Now, this last one I'm going to spend some time on. You've got usable space is being billed before GETS, and then you have allocated space being billed after GETS. So let me explain this a bit. Usable space is all the space that's available in a drive. So before GETS, you had a server, it had a drive in it, and you have all that space that's available on that drive. So that's called usable. Now, the reason we have billing in the environment that's based on usable is because this measurement allowed IBM to assume the risk of the unknown amount of storage that they were moving into support at the start of the contract. But if we look at after GETS, storage in a transformed environment is allocated. And basically allocated means the storage that you're using plus what you would need for growth. Well, right now, which is earmarked about 50% of your utilized space. So there is a potential that once you move from usable space, which you may have a lot of that you're not using, to allocated space that you could reduce your cost. But you may have a situation where you're moving from a direct attached store drive that you're not paying monthly fees for this currently, and then you get transformed, and then you have a new cost. And to be clear, the allocated space does include your operating system and the application data storage. I've learned from Calvin Rhodes that for government agencies, 25% growth year over year for storage is expected. So now that we've gone an overview of SAN, we're going to move to backup, which we have 5 RUs, 4 of them being the legacy RUs, and then the last one, backup recovery services, being part of the new transformed solution. So, what is backup? Well, backup is a daily, weekly, or monthly occurrence of copying SAN data to tape for the preservation of that data and the ability to restore lost data. It's pretty straightforward. So you can see in the diagram here, it looks just like the one we saw before for SAN, but you can see that we have backup is attached to SAN and represents that activity. So in this slide, we see the legacy backup resource units. You have application utility tapes and storage active, and these are simply the tapes that are part of your regular rotation, and it's billed by tape cartridge. You have backup retention DR off-site, which is a charge for keeping tapes off-site and getting them there. You have application utility tapes and storage archive, which are tapes that are backed up and then flagged for archive storage. And then you have the application utility tapes and storage, virtual tape storage. This RU is for when you have extended a backup, extended beyond the capacity of the current infrastructure, and then so your backup is going to run over and interfere with other tape backups. So what this does is gives the agency a chance to perform backups to disk while their tape drives are performing backups, and then move that backed up data from disk to tape at a later time. Virtual tape storage, setting up this RU allowed IBM to assume the risk in the backup environment at the beginning of the contract and manage growth as well when backups continue to grow and get larger. Some of them are going to be too long and then interfere with tape backup schedules. So virtual tape storage allows us to do and manage that. So those are the 4 legacy RUs. Tapes are taken off-site as part of the regular backup rotation. And as far as when we move from legacy to a transformed environment, the virtual tape storage RU is no longer necessary because the solution is scaled to handle all the backups. So you may have some questions about this that we anticipated, so we went ahead and put them on a slide for you. Does every active tape also have backup retention offsite charge? Well, no, because only active tapes that have rotated to offsite storage occur the backup offsite charge. And depending on where you are in your rotation and when the inventory count is taken, you may have an active tape that's offsite or not. Does every agency get billed for virtual tape storage? The answer there is no. Only the agencies that utilize VTS, as it's called for short, get billed for it. I have a stat here that says currently 419 client servers consume VTS compared to the 1,293 client servers that consume legacy backup tapes. So the question that may follow up to that is, well, when would it be billed? And it's only when it's consumed, as far as VTS is concerned. And this last question is, does every archived tape also get backup retention offsite charge? And most archived tapes are stored at recall and incur both an archived and offsite charge. Occasionally, archived tapes are returned on-site for a restore, and if they're on-site at a restore, there won't be a backup charge at the time the inventory is taken. So we thought it would be helpful to look at a couple billing scenarios, and here we have 3. So with active tapes, you're going to get an active tape charge, and depending where it is in that rotation, it may be off-site. So you could be receiving both RU's charges for one tape. And then in an archive situation, you flag the tape for archive. It's been taken off-site, so you're being billed for archive, and you're being billed for the off-site charge. And then, like we said before, some archives, some backups take a very long time, have to put the disks first to not interfere with other tape backups. So that's where you see a charge for virtual tape storage, a charge for active, and also potentially, once the backup has moved to active and the tape may be moved off-site. So you could potentially see 3 RUs for that one tape. And there's some questions about backup retention DR offsite when we were going through this presentation live. And so it turns out that at the beginning of the contract, certain applications were flagged as mission critical, and their data is actually replicated by a network to SAN in Colorado, but the rest of backup for DR is to tape. And then there was a question about time to restore. So the TSM solution, which we're going to talk about in a minute, and I should really call it backup and recovery services, is what it's referred to on the invoice. All the data is on-site and replicated off-site. So the time to restore is always the same, and it's only a matter of hours. But when we talk about legacy restores, it depends where the tape is in rotation. So it may be on-site, or it may be at an off-site location. Because of that, typically 24 hours are needed to restore data from legacy tapes. So when we talk about backup resource units for the transformed environment, there are two. Backup recovery services, which I've mentioned, which is charged per gigabyte. And back in the legacy environment, VTS was the only one charged by gigabyte because it's on disk as well. It's important to note that tape archive RU is the contract exists for it. It's not appeared on the bill yet. It should be coming in a month or two, just so you know. And as far as the transformed environment is concerned, we've mentioned TSM a couple of times. That means Tivoli Storage Manager. It's the solution that's being used for backup and recovery services. So the transformed environment is now streamlined. You get one charge, and it's per gig, so you have a lot more transparency, easier to manage, and this solution is industry standard. So let's take a moment to look at backup transformation before and after deaths. So you've gone from multiple platforms to one single platform that we just talked about. You may have had inconsistent offsite tape storage where today there's a formalized process for transport and retrieval. That's part of the reason why there's a backup offsite RU, or was, excuse me. Backups were managed locally, but now backups are managed in the NADC through backup and recovery services, and in some cases where you're transformed in place in the remote data centers. Restoration for archived tape data was limited to the availability of the original solution. I believe there's some tapes in the state that are so old the manufacturers don't even make the drives anymore for them. So that's a risk that we have. But with the transform solution, the data restoration from archive is platform independent. And then finally, the amount of backup volume is unclear today because it's on tape and not measured by gig. But in the transformed environment, it's all measured by gig, and it's uncompressed volume measurement. So let's transition to rate history. We always like to go over the rate history because there's always been questions about being able to budget with variable rates. Well, so if you can look past the dip in that 1 month in September, you can see that rates have been mostly stable and flat. So what happened with that dip with application utility tapes and storage active, with backup retention DR offsite, and with BTS? So what happened is when we brought on backup and recovery services, which you can see started billing in August 2012, and then the agency saw the first charge in September. When we brought that online, we had contract change that also affected the legacy tape resource units. And what happened is when those two contracts crossed over, the old contract and the new negotiated contract, it caused a large dip in the rate. But what it also brought was the ability for all agencies consuming tapes to reduce their volume and the rate stay the same, so it becomes a P times Q reduction. So you don't see a situation with other RUs where it's sensitive to volume and the rate would go up when the volume goes down. And this is a benefit to the state. So managing storage consumption. These are things the agencies can do. Storage can be added, increased, and removed by the agency through Order Now online service catalog. There's an upcoming streamlined process, be effective August 5th, that service catalog will be changed to include storage deletion. It already has change and adds in it. And change requests for storage changes will no longer be required. Everything will be through Order Now. And in rare cases, you'll have to submit an RFS if there's a large increase in storage that you've got legacy equipment and you're going to require new hardware. And also, if you look at the addendum of this presentation, there's a step-by-step process for changing storage as it currently shows up in Order Now, and there will be the added feature of the deletion coming August 5th. So best practices in consumption management. So number one, because there's different pricing tiers for SAN storage, select the proper tier for the business need. Don't use Tier 2 storage when Tier 3 will work. Do not overestimate the disk space a server will need. So once again, once you're transformed, you can allocate the space that you need with room to grow. Determine and enforce data retention pile requirements. We have found that there are really not a lot of definitions around data retention, and some tapes are flagged to not expire for 100 years. And obviously that's not good, and that increases costs. So make sure that you have data retention requirements and enforce them. That's going to help you reduce your costs. You should store only agency-related data. I mean, obviously pictures and music and all that will add up, and you'll be paying for something that's not worth anything to the state. And you also need to monitor your personal folders for the same thing and make sure they're consuming what they should, that's approved state information. And then finally, eliminate data redundancy, the same data stored in different folders. I've heard stories of databases being copied and being copied and being copied. And obviously if it's a large database, that's a lot of data that doesn't need to be stored in different places and charged for that. So as we continue best practices in consumption management, we expect the agencies to reconcile their bill, and so that have a better idea of what's going on in your environment. The storage inventory billing is taken on the 15th of the month. So that's when you'll know when your snapshot is taken, and there are consumption reports that are coming online that will allow you to see your data snapshots. As well, it's important to mention is when you look at this example of GTA's bill, that you'll see the tapes. You may have noticed it before. The tapes are, even though they're measured by tapes, there's fractions. Here, there's fractions after the number of tapes, and the reason for that is cartridges are shared for backups between multiple server host names, and therefore you may have a tape that has some storage on one and then moves to another and not fully utilized, and so that's why that is fractional. So as far as the reports that are available today, recently, within the past 2 months, we've released the Server and Storage Report Group Invoice Detail report. It's a lot of words. But this was designed as part of Project IC with the help and input of our agencies, and it includes details as listed here. For SAN, you have unit, server, host name, usage date, cost center, and then your array name type and model. For the backup RUs, you have unit, server, host name, usage date, cost center, dataset name and volume / serial number. And then for transformed, you have units, server, host name, usage date, and cost center. So with this information, if you know an application per se is on a certain server host name, you can really go back and see the cost of the application, because you can look at the cost of the server instance, which we talked about last month, and the storage that's related to it by way of the server host name. So how do you address discrepancies in your bill? Well, as we keep saying, order now is your place to make changes. So if you find a cost center that's mislabeled, or really within storage, given what we just went over, that's about the only thing that's not determined by the system. So you would go into Asset Manager would go into Order Now and use the change and attribute to existing asset product to make those changes. And then if you find you're being billed for a server host name that is not yours, that would be a reason for a dispute. And you can submit that through chargebackadmin@gta.ga.gov with the required documentation, which would be the month, the invoice being disputed, the server host name, the cost center, and the rationale for the dispute, and contact information so we can get back to you. So GTA's role in storage management. So we have the governance of the storage tower, which includes process improvement, verification, reporting, oversight of capacity planning, and oversight of the change process, service level agreement validation and management, and then we manage the transparency into the total cost of service and negotiating competitive rates, just like the recently negotiated change in the rate for backup and recovery services. So we're moving through a contract change there, and the rate right now is about $1.05, and then it's over the course of a couple months, it's going to get down to 65 cents about. So that's a good situation that we've been able to work out with IBM on your behalf. As far as dispute resolution goes, your CRM is your single point of escalation, and disputes go into chargebackadmin@gta.gov. And empowering agencies with knowledge. Today we have the server and storage report with what I went over earlier in the presentation. And there's also some more reports that will be coming online soon. And if you need help determining how many pictures are being stored on a drive or anything of that nature, you can work with your CRM, and GTA will provide the technical assistance you need to do that. So, in summary, the agency is enabled and empowered to perform consumption management for storage. So, select the proper tier for business need, data, and performance. Ensure stored data is agency related. Eliminate data redundancy. Right-size your storage allocation, and determine and enforce data retention requirements. With a preview of what's ahead, in August, we'll be looking at the mainframe tower. And if you're sitting with your CRM today and reviewing this, please complete your learning objectives evaluation, and we'll see you hopefully in August for the mainframe session.